Appreciate you being here. Although I know you may not be here by your own free will, but I still appreciate it. This is a hard case. There's a lot of emotion in this case. And Amber Massengill is very good at giving an emotional closing and wanting you to play on your emotions. The jury instructions will tell you that this case is not about your emotion. It's not about sympathy. It's not about anything else. It's about proof and what's in the evidence. That's what this case is about. This case is more about what Megan Boswell didn't do than what she did do. Now, I'll go back through the witnesses here with you in a minute. But the state seems to be putting forth the theory that you should convict her of first-degree murder because she didn't grieve appropriately. She had fun after her child died. Now, is it far-fetched to believe that the child died in the first part of December, like she says? No, that seems to be the point where you see Megan's personality start to change. But I would suggest to you that change occurs when the child dies. You start to hear various friends come in and they talk. I can name them for you. Let's talk about Casey Saltz. She worked at Megan's pediatrician. And she was also, technically, would have been Megan's foster sister, I guess. She was the daughter of Megan's foster mother. And she talked about Megan being a good mother. She acknowledged that. She witnessed that. Megan brought her to the doctor. You have an exhibit in the records. It's item 67. It came in through the pediatrician. Read that page for page. It demonstrates that Megan was a good mother to Evelyn. She took her to the doctor for well checks. She took her to the doctor when she was sick. She got medicine for her. She did what she should do. And then she misses that appointment in December. And that's when this starts. And I would submit to you, when all of this really starts, the child is dead. Now, we hear from other witnesses. We hear from Paul Miller. That is Ethan Perry's grandfather. He had no reason to believe that she wasn't a good mother. Seemed like she liked being a mom. Saw no signs of abuse or neglect. We heard from Audrey Gibbs. She'd been with Megan almost every day up until she moved to Knoxville in 2019. She describes Megan as a good mom. There are a few things. There was once where she thought her diaper needed to be changed. Once where they neglected to buckle the car seat. But those are mistakes. That's not child neglect. That's not child abuse. Those are mistakes. Audrey talks about Megan coming to Knoxville up into December sometime, and by that point she acts disassociated. She's not normal. She's saying "I love you" over and over again to her. So, again, maybe she's not grieving right. Bailey Hawkins stayed at the Econo Lodge with Megan. Megan just went to sleep, despite Bailey thought they might do things. They might talk or whatever they might do. But she just went to sleep. Again, I would suggest to you she's disassociated. Bailey saw no signs of abuse, no signs of neglect. Mr. Horn questioned her. She described Evelyn as the one consistent love that Megan had. And Megan is a girl who comes from a world of fractured relationships. And Miss Massengill wants to downplay Megan's home life. Matt Price did. There's a video in there. He talks about it. He talks about, I mean no disrespect, but I know that Boswell family. I'm aware of them. I know how you come up. Your mom and daddy using drugs. I mean, you want to talk about a home life, watch the video with Agent Fraley. Her mom was let in there in stripes. a jail uniform. What kind of home life was that? And then we get to Caitlin Jones Carter, whom you can make what you want of her testimony. Her body language tells me she's no longer Megan's friend. However, she described, aside from the one day when she saw Evelyn as dirty, that Megan had been a good mother. No signs of abuse, no signs of neglect. She said she saw Evelyn sometime in December. She tried to tie it to her school, but she really couldn't give us a specific date. So I think the best you can say is that it's sometime in December. Gail Kite. Let's talk about her. Megan's foster mom. She gets Megan when Megan comes into her foster care. Megan's 7 months pregnant. She's 17 years old. Gail describes her as looking like she's not pregnant, as being underweight. We know from the medical records and the testimony that come in from Dr. Smith, Megan suffered from intrauterine growth restriction at that time. We've heard that. So that's the shape she's in. But Gail talks about how she gets her in good shape. She has the baby. She's a loving mother. She takes care of the baby. Gail never saw abuse, never saw neglect, never had any doubts about Megan. Erica Stacy, and that's the mother of Megan's ex-boyfriend, and I think his name is, can't remember his name honestly, but it's the mother of his ex-boyfriend. She described Megan as a good mother. Evelyn was always clean. And I'll point something out to you. The state wants you to believe that Megan just meets Hunter Wood and throws this child away for him. She didn't do that for, I think it's Caleb Stacy. She didn't do that for Caleb. There were other boyfriends. Now there's talk about, a lot of talk about Ethan Perry thinking he was the father. Well, the proof you've actually seen is they go about as Ethan is the father. And there's been no proof that Megan knew that he wasn't the father at that point. I'm not trying to, it just happens that sometimes people may think one person's the father and they're not. But calling him out of anything or anything else. Like, it's not like this didn't start early on that she thought Ethan was the father. She obviously thought a lot of Ethan. She drove to Texas, took Evelyn to see him. Now, he did say one thing that kind of struck me a little odd. He acted as though she just showed up in Texas. I suspect, and he finally admitted on cross-examination, that he told her where he was in Texas. You just don't hop in the car and drive to Texas and say, I'll drive around El Paso till I see his car in the parking lot and pull in. That's not what happened. I think he kind of wanted you to think that, but that's not what happened. Let's talk about Randy Wood. Randy Wood is the father of Hunter Wood. The state called him. The state is the one who elicited the information about Hunter Wood being hospitalized. That's the first you hear of him being hospitalized. It's the state. Now, Ms. Massagill wants you to think I have some grand conspiracy theory. I don't. I do have a statement from Megan Boswell when she talks to Agent Fraley about what happened in this case. She says, Hunter was there when Evelyn died. I wrapped her up and I swaddled her. I held her. She kept getting colder as the day went on. I didn't want her to get cold. Hunter took her and he got rid of her. Now, they want you to believe that that's just impossible. Why did Hunter not give his DNA? Ask yourself that. If you have nothing to hide, why wouldn't you just let them test your DNA against all the evidence they have? Turns out they couldn't have tested it, probably. But he didn't give them that chance because he had something to hide. Now, his dad said that he was schizophrenic. I asked him, is he schizophrenic and have hallucinations? He agreed with me on that. He also agreed with me when I asked him if he talked about using an aluminum foil or tin foil. And he says, yeah, he talks about some off-the-wall stuff. Now, ask yourself, who's more likely to wrap that child in tinfoil? The child's mother that has cared for the child, taken care of the child, or the boyfriend who's schizophrenic? And I'm not trying to vilify Hunter Wood. That's not been my intention throughout this trial. But Megan's statement is that one of them rolled over on the bed. And the young mother may think that. There could have been other causes. When we get to the causes, I guess we can go ahead and we can talk about Dr. Schmidt and Dr. Malushnik. Now, Dr. Schmidt, I asked her about several different things. She's the lady who actually performed the autopsy. And she formed an opinion of homicidal death based on the way the child was in the trash can. But she could not tell you a medical basis for the child's death, other than a diagnosis of exclusion. And a diagnosis of exclusion is simply, we don't know what else is wrong with her, so she must have smothered in this trash can. That's what what she said, essentially. Now, I cross-examined her about a lot of things. I asked her about SIDS. And even though the subsequent doctor didn't agree with it, Dr. Malushnik, I didn't ask about something that didn't exist. Dr. Schmidt knew exactly what SIDS was. We talked about it. We talked about the ages, how we don't know what causes it. She answered questions about it. She said, ultimately, she could not rule that out in this case. Just like she could not say with any degree of certainty that the child was placed in the trash can alive or dead. She couldn't say that. She brought up that the child had a heart valve that leaked. She admitted under cross-examination that that could have been what killed the child. We talked about laryngeal, we talked about laryngeal convulsions. Could that have caused the death of the child? She admitted it could. Now, Ms. Massagill brought up tongue tie. I brought up tongue tie, I brought up GERD, I brought up an infection she had, because all of those things can lead to the onset of SIDS. That's the research, and Dr. Schmidt agreed with that. Now, I want to tell you something about Dr. Schmidt and Dr. Malushnik. I think Dr. Schmidt she was the medical examiner in Johnson City when this happened. Dr. Malushnik is not her boss. She's not, it's not like she's somehow over her. Dr. Schmidt was the chief medical examiner at the Jenkins Autopsy Center, Forensic Center. Subsequently, for whatever reason, the state sent her report to Dr. Malushnik for another opinion. Dr. Malushnik only reviewed her report, and she finds that it's a good report. But then she wants to go further and find with some type of certainty that child was placed in the trash can. And you saw an exchange between me and her in here yesterday. It went on for 4 or 5 questions. And I kept asking her, Doctor, can you say any type of certainty? What can you say about this? Can you conclusively say that that child was dead when it was wrapped in the blanket, wrapped in tinfoil, and put in the trash can? She evaded that question. She wouldn't answer that question. She finally answered that question only after it was threatened she would be in contempt if she didn't directly answer the question. And her answer was, no, I can't say conclusively. And then she threw out kind of a parting shot at me as she left. And suggest to you the more accuracy of that parting shot. She said the child could have been murdered some other way. Should have been. The child could have died some other unknown way. That's what the truth would have been. She presupposed that this child was alive when it went in the trash can. The doctor who did the autopsy was very clear she could not conclude that. She said it couldn't be excluded, but it cannot be included. Dr. McLucent come in with a preconceived notion of that's what happened. Now, the state has to prove to you cause of death in this case. They have to prove that child was unlawfully killed. They have to prove this wasn't an accident. The proof from Dr. Schmidt leaves open a heart, it leaves open SIDS, laryngeal convulsion, it leaves open all of those things. We don't know what happened. It also left open a rollover, which is what Megan told Agent Fraley. And now, would Megan know for sure that that's what happened? Maybe not. You wake up and you find your baby dead in bed. Could you not come to the reasonable conclusion one of us must have rolled over on it? I mean, she's 17 years old. She's not sophisticated. She's had a hard life. She's scared that she's going to get in trouble. Hunter Wood's scared that he's going to get in trouble. And that's why she does what she does. Hunter takes the baby to dispose of it. She knows about it. Is that right on her part? No, it's not. Should she have called and reported it? She absolutely should have. I told you that in my opening statement. Have they proved that she's a liar over and over? They have. Don't deny that. They haven't proved she's a murderer. You have more counts of false report than I can really count. I think there's 11 or 12 of them. Almost every time she's talking to law enforcement, you're considering a count of false report. With the exception of, you're not considering one for the time she talked to Agent Fraley. That's not before you. I would submit to you what happened was the conversation with Agent Fraley on the 25th of February, almost 5 years ago. That was a breaking point. That's a breaking point where she finally admits Evelyn is dead. She's able to admit to herself. You saw all these pictures she's sending back and forth before that. That's how she's grieving. Maybe she doesn't want to accept that the child is dead. Maybe as long as she keeps talking about it, talking to the media, talking to the police, and saying that Evelyn is somewhere else, she believes that. Maybe that's how she's getting by. You can't judge someone for how they grieve. You don't know what goes through their head. You don't know what they were raised with. I've never lost a child. I hope none of you ever have. But how am I to tell someone when they lose their child how they grieve? How am I to do that? Amber can tell you that. Oh, she shouldn't have went here. She shouldn't have did that. How does she know that? She's not in Megan's shoes. She's not out there living in that single-wide trailer. That's not her life. She's not been raised by drug addict parents, a dad that beats on her mom constantly, and seen that growing up. She's not seen that. She can't put herself in her shoes. It's not fair to say she murdered her child because she didn't grieve right. I resent it. You should too. You should look to the evidence in this case. Do they prove a cause of death? That's the stopping point on the homicide counts. They can't do it. They brought two medical examiners in here who contradicted each other. The first one at least had read her medical records. The second one talks about how she is perfectly a healthy child. She ignored everything in her medical records. She didn't talk about them. It was obvious to me. Should have been obvious to you. She hadn't read them. She didn't care. It was her job to come here and convict Megan Boswell of murder. If you don't believe that, why would she leave here and say, well, she must have been murdered some other way? She was a biased witness, and she wasn't a credible witness. Now, let's talk about the tinfoil. How can her one fingerprint be on a piece of tinfoil? Can you all see this roll? Maybe like this. Okay, my fingerprint's on this roll. I've taken this one. The next person who gets this is going to get a piece of tinfoil with my fingerprint. That's a possible way. What's another possible way? We've heard that the tinfoil had food and debris on it. Now, there's food and debris in the like that. Whoever got it would have had to have reached in there and gotten several pieces. There were several pieces of tinfoil. I believe 4. There should have been fingerprints all over it. One fingerprint. One fingerprint. It doesn't prove she put that tinfoil on there. Now, what about DNA on the garbage can? I would just about guarantee you, each and every one of you, your DNA is on your garbage can in your kitchen. Your DNA is all over the house. Your finger, I said DNA, actually fingerprint. Your fingerprints are all over your house. It's the kind of thing we don't think about, but you touch something, you put your prints. I think that's what you should consider. I mean, probably Evelyn's handprint on the trash can. At some point, I think in opening, I mentioned to you an unidentified palm print on the trash can. Well, I didn't know at the time it was a child's because it wasn't in the fingerprint analysis report. It's not unbelievable that it's a child's. Now, Ms. Massengill made a statement, and I was a little perplexed with it. The defense wants you to believe that wearing gloves prevents putting fingerprints on something. You heard the fingerprint experts say they can. I think we all know that from our common sense stuff. If you cover the fingerprint up, you're not going to leave it on something. Now, let's go back to the statement of Agent Fraley. February the 25th. She's talked to law enforcement over and over. And she talks about how she breaks down. She breaks. It's the breaking point. She admits she's dead. And she's telling them the truth. How do you know she's telling them the truth? Because if she's still trying to lie to them, if she's still trying to confuse them, she wouldn't have said, I don't know where the baby is. It could be at Hunter's. It could be at Tommy's. Why would you say, if you're trying to lie to them, perpetuate this lie like Ms. Massengill tells you, that the baby could be at Tommy's? Why would you do that? Ask yourself that question. She's telling them where the baby is. She thinks, I think it could have been left one of these two places because I want to find it. And you'll have that video. You can watch it as many times as you want to. I hope you will watch it again. You hear Agent Fraley talk about how he'll go to the DA. She's a scared young mother. He understands that. Now, I don't have to prove this case to you. I wish I could, but I can't. You can't prove a negative. What I can tell you is the state has not proven their case. They've not proven the cause of death. They've not proven that the death was an unlawful killing as opposed to an accident, or some rolling over in the bed being an accident, or some kind of health-related issue. They haven't proved that. Let's talk about the gloves. I go around in circles sometimes, and I hope y'all are following me. I apologize for that. But let's talk about those gloves. Ms. Massagill talks about the criminal tore the gloves up in the trash can. I think if you'll remember back and look to your notes, TBI cut those gloves up for testing. I could be wrong, but I think that's the case. Now, what do those gloves tell us? Do they match up to anyone? No. But they do match up to an unknown male. There's not enough profile there to match it to someone to specifically identify them, but it matches it up to an unknown male. That's why there's not multiple fingerprints on the tinfoil on the child. Those gloves that match some unknown male. We know it's male DNA. We know that. Finally, let me talk just a little bit about Hunter. There's a text thread, and it's in February. It's between Megan and Hunter. And it appears like Megan's telling Hunter the same story she's telling everyone else. But remember, Megan's told Agent Fraley that Hunter doesn't want his name brought into this. He doesn't want to be involved. He told her not to tell anybody anything about the child. At this point, Hunter, he throws out a name in that text. He talks about Agent Will Hoyt. He's been involved with the police. He knows the police are looking at this. This is February the 22nd. Suggest to you that text thread is, look at the texts, they're self-serving. I'm just worried about the baby. I just want the baby returned safe. That's Hunter and Megan's way of covering Hunter's involvement in this. I'm not saying Hunter killed that child, but I'm saying he did dispose of the child. That text thread, it's a convenient way if you think about it. If you're trying to have proof that you didn't do something, if you start a conversation, start texting it, say, oh no, I didn't do that. Look at my text. I texted her, she's told me this. It's a convenient thing for him. But he didn't give his DNA. We know that. His dad talks about he went crazy because he was called a baby killer. Maybe he went crazy because of his participation in disposing of that body. We don't know. Everybody seems to agree he has went crazy. You saw a document admitted this morning, that's where he's being held out of court over in Virginia to be evaluated to see where he's competent for some crime he's committed. He's up at Marion right now to be evaluated. That's what we know. I hope I've answered your questions. I hope my argument has helped you somehow with this case. But what I would say to you, if you have questions about any elements of these crimes, and your questions are not answered to your satisfaction, you have reasonable doubt. If you say, I don't know how that child died, that's reasonable doubt on this homicide count.